I better stand over here so that I end up on the tape. So today's topic is the ever so exciting non-voice communications and information networks. Since we had more or less 3 classes on labor law and on hiring practices and things like that, this might be a nice break into something a little bit different. And as I said, this is the last class. So at the end of this, I'm going to kind of open it up for any other questions you might have over anything else that we've covered in the courses up until now. And I have not forgotten that I still need to email out Carl's materials from when he was here, so I'll get that out to everybody. And I'll also send out information about testing dates and things like that, because after this, if you guys still have your books and you're still going over this stuff occasionally, you should be ready. I mean, it's a daunting test just because it's so long and you prepare for it for so long, but it's really not that difficult if you're prepared. So, and you guys are prepared at this point. So I would highly recommend that you go ahead and do that. Okay. There we go. Oh, it was my lovely disclaimer that I have to say, which basically just means that I'm not speaking for the 911 authorities of the state. I'm just speaking for us. Oh, I got the wrong mouse. That's why it's not working. Okay, so we're all on the same page here. These are the things we're going to go over today. Non-voice communications, and mainly went by what was listed in the book, because that's the stuff that's going to be covered. I did throw a couple of other things in there that are newer topics that are too new to be in the ENP manual, which means they probably won't be on the test either, but because they are hot topics and they're things that you need to know about, I've included them. But the things that I've included here today are telematics, text messaging, email, multimedia, social networking. And under information networks, we have the intranets and VPNs, local area networks, wide area networks, wireless local area network, Bluetooth, and public safety LTE. The public safety LTE is an area that I've added because it is a hot topic right now, even though it's not in your book, but it's important for you to know and just in your jobs. So we'll start with telematics. Telematics are the mechanisms that support the acquisition of telemetric data and action based upon it. That was the Nina Master Glossary. I hate it when people make definitions of things that sort of refer back to themselves. So in the definition for telematics, they refer to telemetry, so that doesn't really help you a whole lot. So I included another definition for telemetry: the highly automated communications process by which measurements are made and other data is collected at remote or inaccessible points and transmitted to receiving equipment for monitoring. That's the definition from Wikipedia, which is actually a pretty good definition. So essentially what telemetry is if you have a device in a piece of machinery or in an apparatus of some sort that allows you to detect measurements from that device at a distance. And the one that we're most commonly aware of is like OnStar. That is a telemetry device in a car. So the OnStar call center has the ability to know whether that car is turned on, whether it's turned off, what mileage it's got on it, whether it's been in an accident based on various sensors that are within the vehicles. So that's what telemetry is. Telematics is the mechanism, the electronics that allow you to detect those sensors remotely. Telematics can also mean the ability to control that device remotely as well. So that communications can go both ways. You can have sensors in the device that are sending information to you, and you have the ability, in some cases, to send commands back to the device that will be followed using electronics and computer technology. And OnStar has that in some of their vehicles. Some of their higher-end vehicles that have OnStar built in, or other vehicle telematics systems, can do things like shut the engine down. Can actually bring the car to a slow stop and shut the engine down if the car's been reported stolen. You know, the police call in and say, we've got the vehicle, we would like you to stop it, we're in a vehicle pursuit. They can actually dial into that car remotely and make it shut itself down. That's telematics. That's an example of telematics.
Is that, I know that a lot of our systems give us feedback if they go down, or like routers, or you know, behind the scenes kind of stuff. Is that also telematics as well, or is that kind of just a system that's?
Yeah, it's network monitoring that is a form of telematics. It's not wireless because it's generally, well, it could be wireless, but generally it's being, that kind of telematics is being done over your local area network, you know, over your Ethernet.
Okay.
But you know, anything that alerts you to something that's happening in a machine that's distant from you, that's physically distant from you, is telematics. You know, based on this definition. Usually, when we're talking about telemetry and telematics in 911, we're talking about things that can connect to the 911 system in some way, but not always, because automatic crash notification doesn't connect to 911 right now, but it might in the future. So that's actually my first topic, is vehicle telematics, because that is the most common use of telematics in 911 right now. Some examples of what vehicle telemetry can include: a gyroscopic sensor in the vehicle that detects whether the vehicle is rolled over, as in a crash. The speed of the vehicle, the vehicle was going at the point of the crash. You can get that from the odometer. Whether or not the airbags have deployed. How many passengers were in the vehicle? A lot of people are surprised by that one. If you have somebody sitting in the seat, a lot of the cars that have telematics built in have sensors in the seat itself that will tell the car whether or not somebody is sitting in that seat. Of course, you probably do know that if you ever sit in the passenger seat and it tells you to put your seatbelt on, how does it know you're there, right? Well, it's got a sensor there that detects that somebody is sitting in that seat. It can be fooled if you put something heavy in that seat, heavy enough to be at least a child. It might think that there's somebody sitting in that seat. But for the most part, it's usually pretty accurate, and that's how OnStar can sometimes tell you we have a detected vehicle crash, have X number of passengers showing in the vehicle, that sort of thing. Whether there were any dashboard warnings in effect at the time of the crash, and the latitude and longitude of the vehicle, GPS. So it could have a GPS sensor within the vehicle that would transmit that information. There's a lot more that can come with that. As the technology develops, they're coming up with more and more types of things that they can pick up and transmit along to whoever is on the receiving end of that data, whether it's an OnStar call center or somebody else. So that communications technology could convey this information, could be built in. So like OnStar is an example of a automatic crash notification that is built into the vehicle itself. Or it can use the driver's phone to transmit the information. So in OnStar vehicles, there's basically a cell phone built into the vehicle. You don't have to have a cell phone with you even for it to transmit that information if you get into a car accident. Some systems like Ford Sync are relying on your cell phone to do the transmitting. If it gets into an accident, it uses a Bluetooth connection between the car and your cell phone to transmit the information. If you do not connect your cell phone to the vehicle through Bluetooth, or if you forget to bring your cell phone with you, which who does that these days, but if you're, you know, some people, my dad does, that's who does. He forgets to bring his cell phone with him because he's not from that generation. But if you don't have your cell phone with you, or if it runs out of juice or whatever, that information is not going to get transmitted because it does not have a cell phone built in. That's one way to keep the cost down, but it comes with that drawback. And the information could be transmitted to either to a private call center, which is called a telematics service provider, or TSP, or it could be transmitted directly to 911. What kind of calls do you guys get today for crash notification? You still get OnStar calls? Still a lot of those vehicles out there, they're still pretty popular.
Not a whole lot. Not very often, but every
Not very
now and
often.
then, yeah.
So with OnStar, the calls are being delivered to the OnStar call center. They have their own private call centers, and then they look up based on the geographic location of the vehicle, what PSAP it should go to, and then they call the PSAP. With other devices like Ford Sync, it will all the vehicle's really doing is causing the phone to dial 911. So it uses the normal wireless 911 routing process to deliver the call to the PSAP. It's not going through a call center. You're getting the call directly from the vehicle. So there's a big difference between the way those two things are handled. And honestly, this is one of the big areas right now where there's some debate in the 911 community. How do we want this to be handled? In the past, the OnStar method was kind of preferred because we got, if somebody just hit the button by accident and it wasn't really an emergency, it never got to a 911 call center because it went to their private call center. They said, oh, there's no problem. They said, okay. And they kind of screened out those non-emergency calls for us. But there's some drawbacks to that because there's a delay. It takes them a minute or two to figure out what's going on. Then they have to do a three-way conference call with the 911 call center. They have to relay whatever information they have again. So there's a delay and there's a repetition of information that has to be gathered by using a third-party call center. Direct connection gets rid of that delay and also reduces the chances of a misrouted call, but it means that there's no screening process for those unnecessary calls that might otherwise be screened out by a call center.
So those ones that are directly transmitted to 911, does that, I know that it dials through the phone system through your Bluetooth, but what information is relayed automatically?
It can depend on the system. So with Ford Sync, what it does is you get an automated message, which I know dispatchers love, call takers love, that basically says there's been an activation in this car. I don't know the exact wording of what it says, but it'll give you the option of just dialing straight through, and to press 1 to talk to the vehicle occupant. And you press 1, and if they're able to talk to you, you can just talk to them directly like any other 911 call. If they're unconscious, then that's not going to help you a whole lot. But because it is a wireless call, there's a chance that it'll come in with latitude and longitude, and you can still get people going.
I'm just asking because I have the Ford Sync, so I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I didn't know that.
But my phone is always connected to it.
Always. It automatically connects.
As long as you don't shut your Bluetooth off.
Yeah.
The
And
message
mine
I
is.
got was some stupid computer voice, and it gives me GPS. And then I had options after the GPS, like I'm just ready to start typing GPS coordinates. First thing on it, so that was a little weird, but.
Yeah, and the problem with a lot of these companies is they don't really have any idea how 911 works, right? They kind of came up with this whole system prior to doing any consulting with 911 providers. And when they started getting pushback from call centers and other people, they said, okay, maybe we need to take a step back and do some research. So they've been doing work with NINA at the national level to try to win back some of the lost goodwill that they had from the 911 community, but also to help kind of refine how they do things to make it useful in the call center. But yeah, you still do get an automated computer voice when the call first comes in, but it's supposed to give you an option fairly early on in the call to just press 1 or something like that to talk to the occupant of the vehicle, which is usually your best option because the data that it could give you over the computer-aided voice is probably not nearly as useful as talking to the person in the car if they're able to talk to you. So that's a concern. Next, here's another issue with direct connection to 911. If the vehicle is also collecting things like delta V, which is the speed difference between the point where it was on the road and when it stopped, when it crashed, that's called delta V, the difference in speeds between those two statuses. Yes, it's the change of velocity. Delta means change of velocity. That's important for EMS that are en route. Gives them an idea of, and firefighters, to give them an idea of how severe the crash was, whether the vehicle rolled, how many people were in the vehicle. All that stuff's important, but it's not necessarily important to the call taker. you don't really need to know what the delta V of the car was. It's useful information for EMS. It's especially useful information for the ER doctors, so that they know how severe the injuries are probably going to be when the patient gets in. So the question is, what happens to that information? Right now, the only thing it can do is deliver it to you directly through a computer voice, which is not a great way to receive it anyway, because you got to sit there, listen to it, and type it in. Next generation 911 will theoretically change that, because they'll be able to deliver things in data form. So first of all, you won't have to sit there and listen to it and type it. It'll import directly into your CAD system. And second of all, you may not even see it. It may not show up until the patient gets to the hospital and show up on the incoming terminal at the hospital. So there are different things that they can do to make that data, to route that data and make it show up for the right person, the person who actually needs to see it. So that's what I kind of expect to see with telemetry in the future. That's kind of in the theoretical stages right now, so I'm sure that won't be on your test, but you know, a lot of people worry about all the things that we're going to have to deal with in next generation 911. Really, if next generation 911 is implemented the way people are envisioning it, it's not going to give you more data, it's going to give you less. It's going to give you only what you need, and then the other data is going to go to other people who need it. So, something to hopefully look forward to. So the term to remember here, let me go back real quick. The term to remember here is ACN. Vehicle Telematics, ACN. ACN stands for?
Automatic crash notification.
Automatic crash notification. That's the term that will probably be referred to on the test if it talks at all about telematics in vehicles, because that is the name of the NENA standard that covers automatic crash notification data.
We're actually just getting ready to roll out our policy and procedure. We're implementing a new protocol from ENP, so.
Good. So from, is it Priority Dispatch?
Yeah.
They have is it in the
Automatic
fire or EMS?
It's in the
EMS.
In the EMS protocols. Good. Good for them.
Come on in.
Keeping up with time. Hello.
Hi. Sorry. I thought it was at 1:30.
They have
It's okay. We're recording, so you know, you can join us later.
Yeah.
And I see Val just joined us online. Hi, Val. We're just a few slides into this, so you haven't missed a whole lot yet. A little bit more about vehicle telematics. Now, I mentioned this earlier, that telematics can go both ways, right? So you can have sensors in the vehicle that are delivering information about what's happening in the vehicle to either a private call center or to 911. Telematics can go the other direction. Right now there are no, as far as I know, no call centers in the US that have the ability to send information or send commands to a vehicle. But there are third-party call centers that do. And I mentioned OnStar earlier. In some of their higher-end installations in vehicles, they have the ability to actually make the vehicle stop, to slow down, and then turn the engine off if they receive if the vehicle receives a command from the OnStar call center to do that. And OnStar only does that if they have a request from law enforcement. They say, you know, we're in a vehicle pursuit. If you have the ability to shut this car down, we'd like you to do that. So engine shut off, braking control, ignition control, so if the person tries to start it again, it won't start. That can all be controlled remotely by OnStar. And you know, like I said, that's most useful when the vehicle is being used in an unlawful manner. But it's an option that you need to keep in mind if you ever get into those situations and you have any reason to believe that the vehicle might be equipped with that. You can sometimes call OnStar and have them work with you on that. That's just the beginning of it right now. I mean, we're in the very early stages of this type of technology. I expect to see a lot more of this sort of thing in the future. You know, you guys have probably seen on your Facebook pages, because it got shared a lot when it first came out, was Google talking about their self-driving cars. They're really not that far off from that. Apple has announced that they're working on a self-driving car and has shown a prototype of what they think it might look like. They're always worried. This is my Android versus Apple prejudice coming out here. Apple's always more worried about what it's going to look like than how it's going to work. But the Google car is actually very close to being road ready. And you know, when that happens, you'll be able to control pretty much anything in the car remotely, because that's how it'll work. You know, you can tell it to come pick you up, and it'll come to your
That'd be
house.
weird.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Have it drop you off downtown. There's no parking spaces. Okay, just drop me off. Go find a place to park. Hit a button on your smartphone. It'll come back and pick you up. You know, that's the kind of stuff that's coming.
That's the life, right?
So that's telematics. That's the future of telematics. And that's but these are really the only things that you can do remotely in vehicles now.
They have those commercials for the car that stops if something,
Oh, yeah,
On
the
the one
the
that
crash,
into the active.
whatever, what do they call it?
Well, they're the one that parks for you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those aren't really telematics because that's not being done remotely.
Oh.
That's being controlled from the computer in the car.
Oh.
But if you had the ability to tell the car remotely to go parallel park, that would be a version of telematics.
I get it.
Any questions on vehicle telematics before I move on?
So you're like me, I love it.
You know, I didn't put a slide on this because it's not covered in the book, but there are other types of telematics that are going to become important other than vehicle telematics. One is medical telematics. A lot of people now have, for instance, my mom has a pacemaker that has a basically a low power Bluetooth connection in it. And using an app on her phone, it collects information from her pacemaker about how her heart's been doing and transmits that automatically to the doctor. Okay? In the future, there's no reason why that couldn't also call 911 if the person goes into cardiac arrest from their phone. Automatically make their phone dial 911. With some basic, you know, especially if we have next generation 911, it could also transmit their whole medical history in the background as a file, which you wouldn't have to look at, but then could be forwarded on to the ER so that when the person comes in, they already have all that information right there in front of them. So that's an example of it. A lot of diabetics are now getting implanted blood sugar monitors that could do the same thing. People with epilepsy have implants now that can help control their seizures. That could also potentially be equipped with communications devices. Normally these things don't have cell phones built into them, but they have, like I mentioned with my mom's pacemaker, a low power Bluetooth connection that allows it to connect to her phone. So that's some example of medical telematics. What else could there be? Yeah, those are the two big ones really that affect 911. I mean, in the future there'll be a lot of other things you can do with telematics, but as far as 911 goes, you know, there's a company out right now that I'm interested in buying one of their devices that you can open and control your garage door remotely with it over your phone.
Well, they already have the heating, controlling your
Yeah.
air conditioning and heating.
Yeah, I'm getting one of those installed. I want a smart house. I want to be able to control everything from my smartphone when I'm in Florida. I can look and say, oh, I forgot to turn the thermostat down. Just hit a button on my phone and it turns the thermostat down.
Turn on your porch lights when it gets dark so people think you're home.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Switch lights on.
Those are all examples of telematics. You know, it's all being done over the internet and/or wireless connections. Text messaging is another example of non-voice communications. This obviously is a big topic right now because of the rollout of text to 911. Right now we have 5 counties in Colorado that have text to 911. Some of those have more than one PSAP, so it's more than just 5 PSAPs. But we have 5 counties and at least 2 more that I know of that are very close or on the way, including, and also as the city of Blackhawk I know is very close. They've got 1 carrier up, but they haven't gone live with that yet because they're working on the other carriers. Don't know where you guys are. I know you've had some trials and tribulations with
We're getting closer.
the breakup and remarriage of Intrado and CenturyLink, so
They
that
are playing nice in the sandbox, so
yeah, good,
we're hoping to get some stuff put together soon.
good. The thing to know about text messages, and we'll talk a little bit more about text to 911, but the first thing you need to know is that there are actually 3 flavors of text message. One is called SMS, that's short message service. Yes, short message service. And they're called short message because they can only be up to 160 characters in length.
That's
It is short. And they were never designed for public communication. The SMS channel on cell tower frequencies was designed for back-end maintenance of equipment type stuff that the cell carriers put together. And somewhere, someone along the way said, you know what? We could make this available to the public and they could use it as a text messaging service. And now there are like 2 billion text messages sent every year across the United States. It's grown incredibly. It's become extremely popular, even with all of the other methods for sending text information. SMS is still extremely popular. Most phones support breaking up longer messages into multiple pieces. So, like on my phone, I can keep on typing all day on a text message and hit send. And from my point of view, it doesn't look any different. I don't have to think about that 160 message or 160 character limit because my phone will break it up into multiple messages and send them separately. But SMS does not support pictures or video or sending to multiple recipients. You might think it does because it's kind of seamless with the next item on the list, but that's actually a separate service. So MMS is multimedia message service. It's used the same way as SMS from the customer's point of view. You know, most phones, even some of the older flip phones, I remember you could, if it had a camera on it, you could take a picture and attach it as a attachment to an SMS. When you do that, though, it changes it from an SMS to an MMS, and it's sent by a different channel on the cell network. Then there are over-the-top, or OTT, message services. Those are services that use an internet connection rather than the carrier's SMS channel to deliver messages. Some examples of that are Google Hangouts, a really popular one called WhatsApp that I've never used, but I read about it all the time because they allow you to text back and forth with people who don't even have the app. They can receive it as a text message. They text back to you and it comes in as a message in the app. Facebook Messenger. There are many of those. Those are just 3 of the major examples. Some of these can interconnect with text messaging services like WhatsApp, and some of them may not. Google Hangouts now does interconnect with text messaging. You can send if you use Google Hangouts, it used to be you could only send Google Hangouts to somebody that's on Google Plus with you. And now you can send it to anybody, whether they're on Google Plus or not. If you have their cell phone number, it'll send it to them as a text message. And when it comes back, it'll come in your Google Hangout. Facebook Messenger, I don't think is interconnected yet, but I may be wrong about that. They're all trying to get interconnected because they want to be your one-stop shop for electronic messages and text messages, for internet messages and text messages. So OTT, over-the-top message services, when you hear that, basically that's a internet-based messaging service that may also interconnect with text messaging. And I don't need that phone call right now. So the call flow for text messaging. This is for text 911. So what happens with text to 911 is first a text message is received by the carrier with 911 as the recipient. This was a big debate for a long time, what the number should be. If it should be 911, because they don't have any other numbers like that for texting that are 911. They're either a 10-digit number for your cell phone, or they have the 5-digit short codes. And the carriers for a long time was saying, you know, we could just use a 5-digit short code, it'd be the same thing. And organizations like NINA said, no, the public knows 911, we don't want to muddy the waters and use a different number for text messaging. The text message is forwarded to what's called a TCC, that's a Text Control Center. There are really only 2 companies providing that service, that's Intrado and another company called TCS, which is Telecommunication Systems. That's what TCS is short for. The TCC determines the correct PSAP, so they look at the they look at the location of the call based on the cell tower location as well as GPS and can route the call. Actually, they're actually routing the call only based on the cell tower location. If the PSAP has text to 911 service, the TCC will deliver the text message to the PSAP by the PSAP's chosen method, which we'll get into that in a second as to what kind of methods there are for receiving the text message. Otherwise, the caller will get a bounce back message. It'll say, text to 911 not available in your area, please call 911. That's what it says. Or something very close to that. I may not have the exact wording down, but that's what it says. You can test that here in Weld County because you don't have text 911 yet. You can try texting 911 and see what happens. You'll get a bounce back message. There's a little bit more detail in there. So, I mentioned there are 2 different TCCs, and which TCC it goes depends on the carrier. So the carrier, like Verizon, for instance, contracts with TCS. So every text message that's received on the Verizon network goes to TCS. If it's a different carrier that uses Intrado, then it goes to Intrado. But whichever one it goes to, they will deliver it to the call center. And they may have to pass it off between each other. So sometimes a text message may be received by TCS, but your PSAP is using Intrado to receive text messages. So it's received by TCS, passed off to Intrado, and then Intrado delivers it to you. So there's some complexities built into there, but that's really the basics of it. The TCC initiates a session, which means that any additional messages from the caller will go to the same PSAP. So it basically creates this, this grouping. So it says, okay, we've received a text message to 911 from the cell phone number. We've delivered it to the correct call center. We're going to start a session. So any more text messages that come from that phone, we'll deliver to the same call center. So even if they're moving and they move into someone else's jurisdiction, that conversation they won't get a text message at your neighboring PSAP and go, what the heck is this about? I have no idea what they're talking about, because it'll be in the middle of the conversation. They'll keep the conversation within one PSAP. It was originally reported that only SMS, not MMS, would be delivered to PSAPs. So they said if they try to attach a picture or a video, or if they try to send it to more than one person, include in addition to 911, then it won't get delivered to 911. But Larimer County has reported that they are getting text messages with pictures and videos attached. That it doesn't matter, that it is delivering MMS. So whatever the holdup was that caused them to say that we won't be able to deliver MMS messages, they've solved that technical issue.
Does it have a limit on size of the file?
I don't think so. I think so what Larimer County has reported is that they get the text message and they get I think they said they get a link where they can go and download the file. So it doesn't like pop up on your screen automatically. You have to go and actually retrieve it.
Daryl, this is Val.
Hi Val. Oh yeah, I forgot you're online. What has been your experience on that?
That's right, but we actually have like an ID number that we have to call Intrado and give that ID number to, and they actually retrieve the picture for us.
Okay, so that's a little bit more complicated than just going and clicking on a link then.
It is.
Probably
yeah.
not something you want to encourage the public to do a whole lot.
No, we don't tell them it's available, actually.
Okay. In the future, hopefully they'll come up with an easier way to do that, but then you run into issues. A lot of call centers are wondering how they're going to handle that, whether they want their dispatchers to be able to see pictures sent in by callers, because who knows what it'll be, that sort of thing. So PSAPs have essentially 3 options for how to accept text messages. The first is by direct IP. That's what Larimer County is using. That's what Jefferson County is working on. No, actually they're not. They're working on a web-based solution. Arapahoe County has direct IP. And really that's sort of the preferred method. What that means is that it's delivering it to the call center in an IP format that is integrated with their phone system, with their CPE, or the CPE stands for?
Customer premise equipment?
There you go. Pay attention. CPE stands for customer premise equipment, but it basically means their telephone system. So in Larimer County, they receive it on their phone screen, on their phone control terminal. and that's direct IP. I know that's what you guys were working towards as well, was direct IP so that you can get it on your phone system. Browser-based solutions, so let's say you don't have a phone system that supports that, or it's going to be a long time off in the future, or you can't afford or don't want to spend the money on a separate direct IP connection. You can get a browser-based solution that brings text messages in on a separate standalone terminal in a web browser. It's done over a secure connection. It is using the public internet to deliver it, but they use encryption to make the connection secure. The drawbacks to it are that it's on a separate terminal. It's not right in front of you like it would be if it was on your phone screen. There might only be one in the room, depending on how big your call center is and how many positions you have. There may not be someone sitting right next to it when a text comes in. The benefit of it is that it's practically free. I've heard that Intrado has a version available now. I don't know much about theirs, but TCS has a browser-based solution that's available that they offer free of charge to the call center. The call center just has to provide the computer and the internet connection and have a browser, have the right version of Internet Explorer on it, which I don't know what they'll do since Internet Explorer is going away. Microsoft is no longer going to support it. I guess they'll have to switch to a different version. But anyway, that's the browser-based solution. We have a couple of PSAPs in Colorado that are using the browser-based solution. The first one to go online with Text 911 in Colorado was Pitkin County, and they're using the browser-based solution. It works for them. They only have, I want to say, 4 or 5 consoles in the center, and so they positioned it kind of centrally in the room, and they don't, you know, like every other center that has Text 911, they're reporting a fairly low volume of Text 911 messages. So it has not been, they have not reported that it's been a burden on them. But it's a way that they were able to do it sooner rather than waiting, and at really no additional cost to them. Text to TTY is where the TCC, the Text Control Center, will actually convert the text message into Baudot, which is the code that's used in TTY devices, and transmit it to the call center over a 911 trunk. This is the method that's used in North Carolina, which has all of Raleigh-Durham and the metro area of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina uses TTY for their text to 911. It's really not the preferred method. And the drawbacks to it are that, one, it ties up a 911 trunk for the duration of the conversation. And text message calls to 911 can take up to 3 times longer than voice calls, generally speaking. The average voice call lasts about 2 minutes. The average text to 911 call lasts about 7.5 minutes. And during that time, that 911 trunk can't be used for anything else. So that is I would like it if my computer would stop going into hibernate mode. There we go. So that is a definite drawback of it. By translating it into TTY and delivering it, there's also the possibility that not every character will get translated correctly, and so you can get some garbled characters on your screen, both on your screen and on the caller's device when they receive your text messages back, because it's going by TTY both ways. So it's really not the preferred method, and I'm happy to say that I don't know of any PSAP in Colorado that's either using this method or planning to use this method. Hopefully everyone will be able to either do the direct IP or the browser-based solution. And there's some routing differences that you can undergo with text to 911 as well. So text to 911 calls can be routed to different PSAPs than the ones receiving wireless 911 calls for a particular cell tower. So let's say you have a cell tower on the edge of your county that, for the most part, most of the callers to that cell tower are in your county, so the calls are being delivered to you if they call 911. But you don't have text to 911 yet, and your neighboring county does. You could have the text messages from that same cell tower go to the neighboring county instead of you, if they have text to 911 and you don't. A really good example of making use of this feature is in place right now in Grand Junction. Grand Junction Regional Communications Center, they're working towards text to 911 in the call center, but they're not there yet. They don't have it. They don't want the web-based solution, so they're having to wait for the direct IP, but they didn't want to make their citizens wait any longer. So what they did is they worked a deal with Larimer County. Even though Larimer County is halfway across the state, any text messages sent to 911 in Mesa County are answered in Larimer County. Val, do you know if you guys have received any calls yet in text to 911 from Grand Junction?
We have, Daryl. I believe we get a few of them each month. We pull reports for Monica each month. I'm not sure if any of them have been legitimate emergencies, because I don't look at the detailed reports of everyone, but we definitely do receive a few from Grand Junction every month.
And that's working. And you know, Kimberly Culp, the LEDA director, went to a task force meeting back, I think it was back last September, and said that Larimer County was willing to host text to 911 for call centers that were working towards text to 911, but not quite ready to do it yet. As far as I know, Mesa County is the only one that's taken them up on that. But you know, it's a great way to make use of this additional feature that's available in text to 911 to make it available to citizens sooner rather than later. So good on them. Any questions on text to 911?
Do we have anybody in the state, or is it even an available option to integrate into CAD?
To integrate into CAD directly? I don't know. Val, do you know, is there a way to say if you get your text message on your phone screen, can you translate that into your CAD system automatically?
We cannot. I don't know if we're progressing in that direction or not. That'd be a question for Kimberly, but yeah, we cannot do that right now.
You know, theoretically it wouldn't be that hard because most of the phone systems that already have TTY support, I know that you can have that information ported into your CAD system if you have the right interface set up, you have the right CAD system, and there's a lot of variables there.
Well, I mean, we're already dumping things like your E911,
right?
You know, your GPS coordinates and stuff. So
it seems like that shouldn't be too hard, but it may be something that you have to work out between your text 911 provider, which would be Intrado or CenturyLink, and your CAD provider, who is
right now it's Spillman.
Spillman. Yeah, I know you're in the process. Yeah, looking for somebody else. So, you know, that'd be a good question to ask potential CAD vendors too. You know, if you're looking to buy a new CAD system, would you be able to import information from our phone system, like text to 911 conversations? Any other questions on text 911 before I move on? Email. This is listed in the book, I believe, which is why I included it, although it's not normally a method used for delivering 911 information. But some PSAPs do have email addresses that they advertise for use by the public to report emergencies. There are some serious considerations that you should think about before you decide to do something like this. Is the email address easy enough to remember in an emergency? My guess is that those PSAPs that do have an email address for reporting emergencies probably don't get a whole lot of communication through it. Will the PSAP be able to publicize the email address well enough for it to be useful? And will someone be able to monitor the email address, and this is the most important one, 24/7, 365, so no request for service are missed. Any type of communication that you advertise as a way to report emergencies has to be monitored 24/7, 365. Absolutely, positively, no exceptions. Any time you advertise something as a way of reporting emergencies and then don't monitor it, that is just a lawsuit waiting to happen. It will come back and bite you. So if you are advertising an email address or any of the other stuff we're going to talk about here in a minute through social media as a way of reporting emergencies, that has to be monitored all the time in your PSAP. I don't know of any PSAPs in Colorado that advertise an email for reporting emergencies, but it's possible they do. I'm just not aware of it. Multimedia. Some PSAPs that have text to 911 have reported that multimedia attachments, pictures or video, can be supported, but there are still problems with it. We just heard one problem from Val, the fact that it's not easy for them to retrieve. They actually have to contact Intrado to get it. But even after that problem, eventually that won't be the issue. Eventually there'll be a way to deliver it to the call center. There will still be problems with it. One is, in a large incident, if multiple people are using the same cell tower to try to send picture or video files, what's going to happen? It's going to slow down. Yeah, there's only so much bandwidth on a cell tower. The more people are trying to use it, especially to deliver large data files, it's going to jam up, and nobody will be able to get through. Once it is received at the dispatch center, what can be done with the multimedia file? Does it provide any information for the dispatchers that a verbal description from the caller couldn't? You know, if they tell you there's been a car accident here, and they can give you a description of the car because they're standing there looking at it, that's not really that useful to get a picture of the car that was in the accident. If it was a car that they took a picture of, and this is an example that I like to use because it's a good example of when it would be useful. Let's say there's an abduction, the caller witnesses an abduction in a grocery store parking lot. Somebody being forced into a vehicle, driver gets in the vehicle, drives away. The caller snaps a picture of that vehicle as it takes away. What's more useful, a picture of that vehicle before it left, or a verbal description as the caller remembers it after the fact?
Picture.
The picture is more useful because verbal eyewitness testimony, eyewitness descriptions are notoriously bad. People are really bad at remembering details in emergency situations. So that's an example of when it might be useful. Maybe not to you, but if you had a way to get that picture out to the field units on their car computers, that'd be really helpful to them. Could it cause a negative emotional or stress response in the telecommunicator? There's a PSAP in the state with one of their spokesmen. He uses this example a lot as the reason why they don't want multimedia at their call center, which is, let's say there was a plane crash. There was a plane crash in their county a few years ago, and let's say somebody went out there and called 911 to report the plane crash and started taking pictures of body parts and sending it to you. That's probably not something the call taker wants to see, and it could add to the critical incident stress nature of the call. I mean, it's already a critical incident stress call in the making. If you add stuff like visual imagery of the victims of the crash, that could be worse, right? So there's some problems with that in that regard as well. And then you have the people, 911 call takers, especially during the nighttime, will sometimes get calls from people with who are calling 911 to entertain themselves in various ways, maybe doing some heavy breathing.
Yep.
You really don't want a visual of what's happening there, I guarantee it. So that's another issue. If they're able to send in picture or video messages along with their calls, that is a potential hazard.
Yeah.
If it's something useful to first responders, how does the PSAP distribute it to them? In most cases, I would say most PSAPs don't have a quick and easy way to send multimedia files out to their field units. Maybe they will in the future. If they have an MDT system now, they may have a way to send it out to them. But most MDT systems even don't support that right now. So it's something that'll have to be developed by the vendors as time goes on. Any questions about multimedia?
It gives me a heartburn. We talked about it last week, and it can change so much. Because someday in the future, if we ever have a dedicated broadband for just public safety,
Right.
to have one of our dispatchers watch an active shooter, or, I mean, really at that point, we're the true first responders.
Mhm.
And so to have to train an entire room of dispatchers basically how to do a size up or a 360, or, I can see the shooter and I know where he is.
Mhm.
That makes me sick.
On the other hand, with the public safety broadband network, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later, the idea is to connect all that information directly to the field too.
Right.
So hopefully, if it's implemented well,
Right.
you still won't have to do that stuff.
Right.
You may be able to access it, but it'll still be the
But
field
we'll have
units
the
doing it.
option,
Yeah. So, and a lot of that's going to depend on each agency how they want to use it. If they don't have units in the field, or they want their units in the field to concentrate on driving to the scene, which makes sense,
Yeah.
then it may be up to the dispatch center to do
Until the
some of
point
that
where we can
initial
hand
stuff.
off to them.
Right,
Yeah.
until they set up a command post.
Yeah.
Exactly. A lot of that stuff, I don't think anybody's really sure how it's going to work yet, so that'll be interesting. Social networking. Many agencies, and more every day, have social networking accounts for public relations purposes. If you are creating a social networking page for your agency, strictly for public relations and not for reporting emergencies, you need to say so on your account. So, does Weld County have you guys have a Facebook page, right?
Weld County
Weld
does,
County
but
does, we
communications
Okay.
does not.
If you ever did create one for the communications center, you would want to put it right there on the top of your Facebook profile. This account is not monitored 24/7, 365. Do not use it for reporting emergencies. Because people have done that. They have tried to report emergencies to police departments and fire departments and what have you through Facebook or through Twitter. If you're doing it for public relations, you don't necessarily need to monitor it 24/7, 365, but you do need to have someone who can interact with it fairly regularly. The worst thing you can do with social media or a website is to build it and then forget about it for a year, because people will realize that it's useless, and it will be worse than useless because people will go there looking for up-to-date information and they won't get it. So you got to make sure that you have someone who can interact with it regularly. Do you have a policy in place outlining what is or is not appropriate content for the account? Lots of agencies have gotten themselves in trouble over this. Who has the access to add things to the page? Is it anybody in the center? That's probably not a good idea. If it's only one person, that may not be enough, because if they go on vacation, then nothing gets updated for a couple of weeks. But a small number of people within the center who have demonstrated the ability to control themselves and not post stuff that they shouldn't post, those are the ones that you want to have access to the account. Generally, it is not a good idea to solicit emergencies from social media sources unless you are going to have someone monitoring the account 24/7, 365. Post a disclaimer on your social media pages asking people to call 911 if they wish to report an emergency. In addition to this, a lot of agencies now have policies regarding the use of social media by employees. So that's how they use their own personal Facebook page, how they use their own personal Twitter account, at least in public forums. So if they're posting stuff that's only visible to their friends, it's probably not a way for you to know what they're posting anyway unless you're in their friends list. But if they're posting it in public, on Facebook you have the option of posting things public, and anybody who goes to that Facebook page, even if they're not signed in, can see what the person posted. And they're posting stuff about calls, and they're posting stuff about the officer that pissed them off on the radio that day, or they're posting about how they've complained to management 3 times about this keyboard with the stuck key on it and it's still not fixed. That stuff makes your agency look really bad. So a lot of agencies are now putting in place policies for use of social media by their employees, basically saying, just don't mention us. Don't mention the job, don't mention anything in any sort of public forum. Is usually a good rule of thumb on that. What was I going to say? Oh, even if you are not advertising your social media account as a way to contact 911 in an emergency, people will still try to use it. And the time that you might want to try it, if you have the people to do it, you might want to put somebody on a social media account and say, your job is to monitor this account for information, is in critical incidents. A really good example of this in recent history is the Boston bombing. The Chernayev, I can never remember the kid's name. The 2 brothers that used the homemade pressure cooker bomb at the Boston Marathon, and he's undergoing trial right now. His brother was killed, but he's undergoing trial right now. Right after that happened, Twitter went insane because there were already people out there live tweeting the marathon. They were tweeting about the marathon, sending out messages, sending out pictures. When that happened, people started tweeting out everything that they thought was relevant. They were tweeting it to each other, and they were tweeting it to the police departments and to the 911 agencies. Those accounts were not monitored 24/7, 365, but they got people on there pretty quick because there was so much information coming in, and it took a long time for them to sort through it all and determine what was useful and what wasn't. But having somebody on it as the stuff came in, I'm sure made that process a little bit quicker.
Well, didn't the Boston Police Department actually set up a website so people could send all their multimedia pictures?
They
and
did,
videos
because
and-
so many people had pictures and videos. They created a special website just for people to upload that stuff so they could review it. You know, and that's a big city, obviously. You know, if something like that happened in Greeley, you know, hopefully not, knock on wood. Anything like that ever happened in Greeley, you probably wouldn't get nearly the volume that they had. I mean, that's a worldwide event, is the Boston Marathon. But it's an example of sort of the extreme that it can go to. And I guarantee, you know, school shootings, a shooting in a church, something like that would probably generate something similar. Probably not for as long of a period of time, but you would get a huge spike in the sort of internet traffic about the incident. And having somebody who can go out there and look for that information could be helpful. It might not be somebody in the PSAP. It might be a police officer on desk duty or something. But keeping that in mind, if something major happens, let's see what's happening in social media, because it can make you guys look good if you're kind of ahead of the game and get on that before someone else thinks of it. Okay, so those are the non-voice communication topics. Before I move on to what was the actual title?
I don't remember.
It was non-voice communications and information networks. Now we're going to talk about information networks, which gets more into the less what it's used for and more of the media, the actual method by which it's delivered. Does anybody have any questions about non-voice communications before I go into information networks? Okay. Well, the first one, and this is listed in your book, it's so pervasive now and so ubiquitous. I wouldn't even have thought to include it because the internet's all around us now. It's not like, you know, I have to tell you really what the internet is. Most people have a general idea. They know how it's used. They may not know all the back end stuff of how the internet works, but they have a general idea of how it works. So I have one of my favorite quotes up here. This is the danger of politicians talking about technical issues that they don't really understand. This is a quote from Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska, who said, and again, the internet is not something you dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes. That's someone who didn't really understand the internet, talking about the internet in a public forum. Actually, the internet is a global system of interconnected computer networks that use a standard internet protocol suite to link several billion devices worldwide. Now, I'm old enough that I started using computers before the internet was really available. It existed out there, but it was really mostly used by the military and by universities. But I still was able to connect to other computers. There were these things called bulletin board systems, where you could dial in using your dial-up modem, and it would use a number of different protocols, and you had to pick which protocol to use to match whatever was being used by the computer at the other end. The beauty about the internet is it all uses one protocol, so you don't have to worry about picking the right protocol to use. It all uses TCP/IP, which is the standard internet protocol. TCP is, I don't remember. IP stands for Internet Protocol. That's not going to be in your test, so don't worry about what TCP/IP stands for. Public safety networks tend to be separated from the internet to some extent, although that is changing over time. When the internet became publicly available, there was a feeling that public safety networks will never ever be connected to the internet because it's just too much of a hazard, too much of a safety risk or security risk. That is changing over time because there's so much benefit to connecting to the internet for one reason or another. Best practice is not to interconnect public safety networks with the internet. More and more agencies are doing it because let's say you have let's say you put in a substation way on the other side of the county, and you want to be able to get information back and forth from the PSAP to that substation way out in the sticks. You could build out your own network, put a fiber network in to connect the two. It's extremely expensive. Or you could connect over the public internet, which costs nearly nothing. And you can do things to try to make it more secure. You can encrypt the data. You can do things that will make it less of a security risk, but there's still a risk there because you're using the public internet to deliver the information. And even if you're not connected to the internet, if your public safety computer network is not connected to the internet, that does not necessarily save you from risks. And a lot of dispatch centers have learned this the hard way. They don't think they need virus software on their computers because we're not connected to the internet. There's no way a virus can get in. And then somebody comes in with a flash drive and plugs that into one of the terminals on the floor, and because there's no virus protection whatsoever, before you know it, every computer on the dispatch floor has a virus in it. So you have to treat it as if it were connected to the internet, even if it's not. Not connecting it to the internet will protect you some, but it will not save you from every possible entry for viruses. What's next? Okay, so that's all the time I spent on the internet. I didn't go into a lot of detail on it because it's a huge topic. I mean, there are entire courses on the internet that we could talk about. But does anybody have any questions about how the internet?
I think you'll probably cover it. So.
Okay. If you think of anything else later, let me know.
Well, remote accessing, like you have an actual server or a network set up, and you're out and about, you have like what would be considered like a portal or a small, minimally set up computer.
Mm-hmm.
But you could go in with your, I don't know, your key or your access code that's encrypted and set up on a timer or whatever, and access that network and all of the vast resources in that network to do whatever it is you want to see. I mean, is that what a VPN is, or?
Yeah, that's a really good description of a VPN. So that's actually the next topic.
Okay.
And I'll start with VPN. So a VPN that stands for Virtual Private Network, and essentially what that is it's using the public. It says the public wires. That's in Webopedia. I don't know anybody who refers to it that way, but anyway, public connections, usually the internet, to connect to a private network, such as a company's internal network. So let's say you have a closed network, which is called an intranet, by the way. It's basically like the internet, except it's not connected to the rest of the world. It's a closed network that's using internet protocol. So you have a closed intranet for your public safety agency, but you occasionally want people to be able to get into it from the outside. You might have one connection to the internet, and it's a secure connection that it will only let people through if they have the proper credentials. So someone else on the outside could use the public internet to reach that network through that secure connection into your private intranet. And that's called VPN, Virtual Private Networking. It uses security protocols, it uses encryption. You sometimes even have to have what's called a security dongle. It's a little device that shows you a number, and that number changes occasionally. And you have to enter that number in as part of your passcode to get into the system. If you don't have the right number, if the number that you have on your device doesn't match what's on the server, then it won't let you in. So you actually physically have to have this thing to be able to get into it. Sometimes it'll be a security dongle that plugs in. So it's basically it looks like a USB drive, but you plug it into the USB port of your computer, and that authorizes your computer to access it. If you do not have that physical thumb drive plugged into your computer, it will not access that network. So there's different ways that they can do it, but that's basically what a virtual private network is. And there's different levels of security that are out there. For public safety systems, you want it to be pretty robust, right? You don't want somebody to be able to get in and just guess a password and get into your intranet and start causing all kinds of havoc. So the question comes, at what point is it really an intranet? Or is it just a network that is part of the internet, but sort of you have to have special permission to get into it? Now, it's kind of a gray area there on the definitions. An intranet used to be not connected to the internet at all. It was just a private IP network, which a lot of a lot of companies, a lot of government offices will use, but even then they want to have some interaction between their network and the internet. Using encryption and security protocols, organizations can use VPNs to expand the reach of their secure networks. VPNs are very safe, but the thing to remember about hackers is they love a challenge. So sometimes the safer the system, the more of a target it is to hackers if they know that it's out there. So they need to be, you need to be aware of the risks of sending data across the internet regardless of security or encryption used. Generally speaking, it is not a good idea to send things like criminal records, medical information, things like that across the public internet if you have any other option. Because even if it's encrypted, even if you think it's secure, that becomes a challenge for somebody to try to get into it. An example of VPNs being used in 911 here in Colorado fairly recently that I learned of is Intrado. A lot of people don't know this, but Intrado has its own 911 call center. And it answers calls from all over the United States if they're unable to route it to a call center. So a call comes in and it's not in the MSAG database, they don't know how to route it. They actually answer it in a call center inside the Intrado headquarters in Longmont from all over the country. And they try to determine where that caller is, and then they route it to the correct call center. But it is a 911 call center because it's the first person that some 911 callers will hear from is a call taker at Intrado. Well, they've started experimenting recently with allowing employees to work from home. What they've done is they've given these employees a laptop with special VPN software and hardware on it, so that they have to have. I think they're using the dongle, the plug-in dongle, where it has to be plugged in. If that's not plugged in, it won't connect. They have to have, username and password, and it dials into their. It uses the internet. It's going over the internet, but it's connecting into their private. Intranet, their private IP network at Intrado, and they're getting calls delivered to them over that connection at their house. And they've used it in emergency situations, like during the flooding, what was it, a year and a half ago, that basically cut Longmont off from most of Boulder and the surrounding cities. A lot of their employees couldn't get to work, so they used it in those situations, and they've also used it just to kind of test it and practice with it on a regular basis, allowing employees to work from home. That raises a whole other set of issues that I'm not going to get into, the benefits or drawbacks of employees working from home. But that is an issue that VPNs does kind of bring up, because the idea that people could dial into a public safety network from another location makes it, here my age keeps tripping me up here. I keep saying dialing into it. There's dialing involved. It's connecting by IP connectivity to a private IP network, to a public safety IP network. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was good.
LAN, WAN, usually known as LAN and WAN. These are in your book, otherwise I wouldn't think to include them. Because a LAN is a local area network. It's really another name for an intranet. It is a private computer network. Intranet is a connection of computer devices over a geographic area, usually a small geographic area connecting computer devices for a particular organization. So the Weld County government complexes are all connected on a local area intranet. Just another name for that is a local area network. These Ethernet connections in the wall, that connects you to your local area network. It's connecting to a specific closed intranet that may also have connections to the outside world. And it usually refers to a fairly small area. It's kind of a gray area as to what that really entails. How big of a geographic area are we talking about? In the case of Weld County, you've got multiple buildings. It may be more of a WAN, a WAN, wide area network, which is really just a LAN that spans a larger geographic area. So if you've got buildings that are spread out over a huge area, maybe you've got one here, you've got one in, I don't know, where are the other county? I know you've got, there's a Weld County building down in Longmont, you know, on the very east edge of Longmont. If they're connected to the same network, then that's a wide area network. They could be connecting over the public internet, but if they're not, if they're connecting through a closed actual physical network, then that's a wide area network or WAN. Any questions on those? Okay, that's pretty basic, but WLAN is a wireless local area network. This is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, and I didn't know this until I started researching for this, for teaching this class today. Wi-Fi is actually a brand name, like Kleenex or Xerox. People call it Wi-Fi as the general term, but that's actually a brand name that belongs to a company. The technical term for a Wi-Fi network is a wireless local area network. So it's basically just you know, a device that uses specific frequencies to communicate with devices by IP, and it's becoming extremely ubiquitous. Something that we are seeing is, well, let me go through the slide first, and then I'll talk about some of the things that are coming up with Wi-Fi. But it has become a very common way to expand a local area network in a cost-effective manner. Running Ethernet cable, which is that thick cable that connects computers to internet networks, to local area networks. Running that to all of the computers in your network and to all the buildings that are in your little organization can be very expensive. It's a lot cheaper to buy some Wi-Fi routers and put them in various locations and have devices connect wirelessly to the network. But that adds some additional security risks, because anybody with a computer that has Wi-Fi connectivity could try to find a way in, and hackers are good at doing that sort of thing. And you can make unauthorized entry to a network without even being physically in any of the buildings. So if all of your computers are connected by Ethernet cable, and that's the only way to connect to your network, you pretty much have to be in one of those buildings to try to access the network. If they're using Wi-Fi hotspots, which most organizations do now, then they can use Wi-Fi to try to get into the network, which explains why Weld County is so protective of Wi-Fi network now. So protective that I'm not even using it today. I'm using the mobile hotspot on my phone.
Wow. So,
yeah.
Question. I just want to make sure that I understand this. A local area network is a smaller network of consoles. Typically in a building, a wide area network would be several buildings or a geographic area. Both of these things still connect to the internet. They are not considered intranets or separate from the internet.
Well, they could be either.
They could be, but they don't have to be.
You know, in the past, it was fairly common for organizations to set up a intranet that did not connect to the internet at all. Now that's extremely rare. I mean, I'm on the internet right now. That's how I access my presentation. So, you know, people really are not expected to be able to do their work without access to the internet anymore. So really what makes it a LAN is the fact that there is a physical connection or Wi-Fi hotspots connecting all of these devices into a network. And sometimes there'll be a way to communicate back and forth across that network without using the public internet at all.
So to me, it's almost like a label, like a city or a county. You're looking at a local area network versus a wide area network.
Right. Except like I just said though, sometimes there's a way to communicate, like there might be a page, a web page for instance, that's only available from inside the local area network.
Okay. So, okay.
And they can set that up internally for their employees or whatever the organization is.
So that would be news. Okay.
Yeah. Now I say that it's only accessible from inside the local area network. A good hacker can get in and make it look like they're inside the local area network and access all that stuff. So really there is no such thing as a completely separate computer network anymore, except in some public safety entities. A lot of times you'll go in, there'll be like, there's a computer network connecting your phone terminals to the server in the back, and that's it. You know, there might not be any other IP connectivity to the outside world. Those are really rare situations anymore. Even in those cases, sometimes there's a connection so that you know, the manufacturer, the vendor can get in and make changes to the server if they have to.
I wonder if that's the case for us, because I know that our standalones are the only thing that connects to the internet in our center. I mean, as far as I'm aware.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we're on internet, right?
Yeah, you know, and there may be specific, there may be connections possible, but they're very secure. So like I was just mentioning with phone systems, let's say, you know, you have, what phone, you have Viber, okay. It's Intrado, right?
CenturyLink.
CenturyLink? Well, it's Intrado.
Viber's an Intrado product, but CenturyLink is our provider.
Yeah, they're the reseller.
I don't know.
So there's probably a way, it's probably in your maintenance contract that they can go into the system remotely and make changes or look for do troubleshooting and things like that.
Okay.
And that's probably being done over the public internet, because otherwise they would have to have a secure physical connection between here and Intrado headquarters, which doesn't seem likely.
No, that'd be really expensive.
Yeah.
Like you said.
So that's probably being done over, you know, with security protocols in place. So it's not like they're just, like anybody can just get into it. But it is a concern. Anytime you have a connection to the public internet, that does create a possible opening for somebody who has the know-how. And every time security experts think that they have created the unbreakable system, some 13-year-old gets in there and breaks into it. And it usually is a 13, 14, you know, somebody in that age range.
Becomes employed by the government.
Yeah, exactly. A couple things to keep in mind about Wi-Fi as things roll out. Gosh, I'm way over on time. I just realized that. I'm sorry, guys. I'll try to wrap this up. A couple things to keep in mind. A lot of communities are now putting in Wi-Fi networks. Like in their downtown areas, they're putting in free Wi-Fi networks for the public. It's meant to be an amenity that makes people want to come and visit more. The businesses like it because they don't necessarily, you know, coffee shops are almost expected to have a Wi-Fi access for their customers now.
It's dangerous.
Downtown big cities, they may not do that because the city provides it for free anyway, right? So that's something to keep in mind, is that's becoming a more and more common method of communicating. And a lot of phones now, my phone is an example, I can set it up to make phone calls over Wi-Fi. The cell company likes that because it keeps traffic off their cell towers. I turned it off because the quality usually wasn't as good. But as that technology improves, the quality gets better, the sound quality gets better. People may be making calls over Wi-Fi instead of over cell networks more, which will be another wrinkle in how 911 works. Bluetooth and NFC. Again, I included these because they're, I think they're in your book. Bluetooth and near-field communications. These are things that people tend to know a little bit less about unless they're tech nerds like me. They're both protocols that are used by, it says many smartphones, I would say most smartphones. And they can be overlooked by security precautions. Bluetooth is commonly used to connect speakers or headphones wirelessly to a smartphone. They can also be used for other things as well. I have a tablet at home. I didn't bring it with me today, but I have a tablet that has a little detachable keyboard. That keyboard connects to the tablet by Bluetooth, so I can type on my tablet. It doesn't even have to be physically connected to the tablet at all. Everybody's seen the little mini headphones that people wear to make phone calls. Those are usually connected by Bluetooth. There's a security risk with Bluetooth because more and more people are using it for various devices and they leave it on all the time. They leave the Bluetooth connection on all the time. If you have somebody, let's say you've got your smartphone and you're in your call center and you connect to your local intranet through a Wi-Fi connection on your phone, because most phones have Wi-Fi on them now too, right? So they connect by Wi-Fi to the local area network, but they've still got their Bluetooth connection open. What could a good hacker do with that Bluetooth connection? They could get into the system that way. Granted, it would take some really good timing to know when somebody's doing this and know how to get into it. To my knowledge, nobody ever has, but theoretically it could be done. NFC is another communication protocol that even fewer people know about. It's called near field communications. Have you guys seen any of the video or read anything about the new Apple feature that allows you to pay for things with your phone? They talked about it. This is my Android versus Apple prejudice. They talked about it like they invented the idea. It's already available on Android devices. Google Wallet is what it's called on Android devices. And I've used it before. Basically, you take your phone. You have to have the NFC switch turned on. There's a switch in your settings called NFC. It stands for Near Field Communications. You switch that on, and you hold your phone up to the cash register card reader. And if the card reader is the right brand and is equipped to do it, it'll connect with your phone through that NFC connection. It's called near field communications because it only goes about that far. It's really, really, really short range. You have to be right. Your device has to be right up next to it. You put your device up next to it, and it automatically will deduct the amount from your account. NFC is used for a lot of other things, but that's really the biggest use of it right now in the public. But if you have NFC in use anywhere in your computer network and is connected to your phone could be a potential security risk. A potential use for this in the future, after everybody has smartphones, and some places already have this as an option, building entry. Hold your smartphone up to the thing and it lets you in. Just like your name badge. Sometimes those work by NFC. It might have a little chip in the name badge. You hold the name badge up to the reader. It's actually using NFC communications, and that lets you into the building.
Our backup center has that.
Your backup center. And for the name badges, it's not really a security risk because the name badge doesn't connect to anything else. For a smartphone, it could be, because the smartphone could be connected to other networks by Wi-Fi, it could be connected to the cell network, it could be connected by Bluetooth. So there are issues that that can come up from that. And NFC, I think, is probably going to get used a lot more in the future. I believe this is my last slide. It is. Sorry I went over, guys. Public safety LTE. LTE stands for long-term evolution. That is an acronym that means absolutely nothing. They seem to do this more and more in the wireless field. They use acronyms to stand for network designs that don't really describe the network. Long-term evolution, what does that mean? Essentially, it just means that all they really mean by long-term evolution is that they can build out on it. It's an open architecture of wireless data network connectivity that allows them to expand it over time. LTE is the industry term for what's usually referred to in the consumer world as 4G. Sometimes you see them call it LTE on the commercials. They might just call it 4G. It really means just the fastest and best and brightest and shiniest form of internet connection you can get on your phone. It's a protocol that's used by cellular devices to access data at high speeds. Many public safety agencies now use LTE networks to operate mobile data terminals in the field. And they could be doing this over, the vast majority of them that are doing this are doing it over commercial networks. They might contract with AT&T or Verizon or Sprint, and they're using their data networks to transmit information out to field units over their MDTs. Adams County, Colorado became the first agency in the country to build their own LTE network for public safety. So they have their own privately owned, it's owned by Adams County Communications LTE network for their public safety broadband. Benefits of that are you're not sharing data bandwidth with all the citizens in the world. You know, especially if a big event goes down, everybody's going to be getting on their phones. They're going to be transmitting pictures. They're going to be trying to transmit videos. They're going to be having phone calls, and all of that is competing with public safety trying to use that network for public safety related purposes. Well, now in Adams County, they don't have to compete anymore because they have their own network just for that purpose. There's an organization called FirstNet. It's a federal agency that was created to build out a nationwide LTE network. That LTE network is theorized to, it's expected to connect field units with their PSAPs basically, and to each other everywhere in the country using a private LTE network. Now they plan on selling some of the access to that network to the public, but the difference is it'll give priority to public safety. So if something major happens, the public safety users will be able to get on first, the public users will get kicked off. So it will still be there available for public safety without those bottlenecks that you can get in commercial data networks. And this is where we were talking about earlier with Next Gen 911 or with text to 911. If they send you a picture, you want to get that picture out to your field units. Right now, most MDT systems don't support that, or it gets really expensive for agencies to do that because they're buying their data from Verizon or AT&T or Sprint. Well, in the future, you'll still have to buy the data, but you could buy it FirstNet for a lot cheaper, and it'll be a lot faster, and be able to get that information from the PSAP out to the field. And that could be pictures of suspect vehicles, it could be mugshot photos, it could be medical data to be sent out to the EMS unit or the fire unit, whatever you want it to be. That is the vision with FirstNet. A lot of people are skeptical that they're going to be able to make it happen because it's an extremely expensive proposition, and their business model isn't really completely fleshed out. So whether they're able to actually make this thing happen or not is kind of remains to be seen. But they've made some initial planning work. They've completed some initial planning work, if nothing else. And that one's not on the test. I just included it because FirstNet is a huge topic in public safety, and you will hear a lot more about it if you read, the NINA publications or the APCO publications and things like that. Now you have a basic idea of what it's about. It's basically a cell phone data network set aside specifically for public safety.
Will the portions of that network be controlled locally, or is it all going to be controlled at a government level, at a higher level?
The levels of control are still something they're working out. There'll probably be some state level control where they can control who has access to the system, maybe give priority. If they have a situation that's almost exclusively police, they could give more access to police agencies versus fire agencies and things like that. That probably wouldn't be done at a national level. Probably wouldn't really be controlled at a local level because that would require too much manpower at the local level and expertise to do that sort of thing.
So we would be reliant on a network that we don't control?
Pretty much.
That's great.
It's government, you know?
But right now you're relying on a network that you don't control. Because if you're using, how are your MDTs? Your field units, yes, Verizon. So right now you're relying on Verizon's network. You would have more control theoretically with FirstNet than you would with Verizon because at least it's
higher priority.
at least it would be geared towards public safety to begin with.
Right.
That concludes this overlong presentation. If you want to learn more about these things, the publications that are out there on public safety communications are really the best way to keep up on this because it's a constantly changing field. Urgent Communications is a good magazine for this. Public Safety Communications is the magazine from APCO. They deal a lot more with this type of stuff than NINA does because NINA is focused more on the 911 side, whereas APCO deals a lot more with wireless communications, so they deal with a lot of FirstNet related issues. 911dispatch.com is a good place to go. And there can be stuff in the Call as well. The Call is NINA's magazine. But those are the three that I'd probably look at first if I was interested in learning more about these particular topics.
Do you get smart briefs?
Yeah, the
And
email.
They have good
NINA
like
email.
news
Yep.
updates down at the bottom if you get the public safety one.
Yep.
There's some cool gadgets on that one.
Since this is the last session, I would open it up if you have questions about anything here today, or if you have questions about any of the previous sessions, anything that you've been thinking about and couldn't quite get your head around, or a question came up afterwards that you wanted to know more about a specific topic. Now's a good time to ask.
Is it worth buying the other practice test? Are there other versions that they send out? Or is it all just one singular practice test?
That I don't know. If you ordered another practice test, would you get a different version of it? That I don't know. My guess is you probably get, they might have like 3 or 4 of them, but I don't know how you would guarantee that you got a different one. Yeah, you might order it and get the same one, even if they have different ones.
It's $100.
Yeah, that's too much to spend and not know.
Yeah, I was gonna say. You could just send one.
I don't think I have any questions.
Okay.
At least not yet.
Well, you guys have my email address.
Yeah.
You know, I'll send out the materials from Carl. I know it's still on my to-do list. I'll get the videos from this and the last 2 posted. Those still haven't been posted yet. This stuff takes some time. But after I get all that up, I'm going to also send out information about testing dates and testing locations, how you can go about getting tested for ENP. It's changed quite a bit since I did it, so I'm going to have to read up on that. And Monica and I have already talked about refreshing these courses maybe every 3 years. It's 15 sessions, so if we did 5 a year and refreshed them, then they'd all be getting refreshed every 3 years. So in the future, if you guys ever want to take a refresher of these, I'll keep you on the email list. If you want to be taken off the email list, you can unsubscribe on there. You can just let me know and I can take you off. But if you want to stay on there, I'll send out updates when we do refreshers of these courses, and we'll probably do them in different locations. So you can, if we don't do it here, then you can join us by webcast.
We'll start sending you emails as we all pass.
Yeah.
I would love
That's
it.
what I was gonna say.
I would love it. I'll put it in the newsletter and put it on the website and say success.
Maybe by the end of next year, we'll all be done.
End
Terrific.
of next year.
I believe Jim Zimmerman. Jim
yeah.
Zimmerman
Yeah.
joined us for a couple of sessions.
Adam, yeah.
He took his and passed, I think.
Oh, really?
I think that was him who told me he passed. So.
Yeah, I think we're all expected to be done
Yeah,
this
by
year,
Yeah.
the end of
except
this
for
year.
Mel.
All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you to Gina and Dial-In, whoever Dial-In is. Thank you very much for joining us. Like I said, I'll get this video and the presentations posted to the website as soon as I can. Thank you.
Applications due June 27th.
Online, where you go